Welcome to the Human Nature Channel. I'm your host, Alex mtamsula, also known as Daddy Baby on Twitter. And what am I doing here? Well, it's Tuesday night once again here in my dad's great place to catch up on your reading farm garage. I bring books up with me. I bring up stuff to read. Between the time Dad goes down to the house and the evening news comes on, there's usually about a half hour, and I try to fit in some reading. Lately, I've been bringing this up, A Storm of Swords, Book 3 in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, so named because I think Fire and Ice has already been taken. And there have been times in summers past when I had the stadium chair up by the garage doors, and they were both up, and I'm in the stadium chair next to a workbench under a light, and I'm reading, and it's grand. My invisible partner lent me a copy of Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, a cyberpunk sci-fi novel, which I enjoyed immensely, and most of it got read with me sitting in the stadium chair. But my favorite story about bringing a book up here is from about 10 years ago. Okay. Now, I've lost track of this book. I have stacks of books in my apartment. It might be in there. I can't exactly remember the title. I think it was A History of the Self. And I can't remember the author. I'm going to try and find it. If I come up with a name and the author, I'll put it down in the notes. But I was reading it back then. I remember finding it on the bookshelf in a Barnes & Noble and pulling it off the shelf and reading it and saying, hey, this is actually pretty well written. This is actually very, very interesting. What it was a survey. It was a survey of what the great minds of Western civilization had to say on the topic of the self. Going back to the ancients, what did Aristotle have to say about the self? What did Plato have to say? I can't remember if the author mentions the great Stoic Seneca, but he should have. What did St. Thomas Aquinas have to say about the self? What did Sir Thomas More have to say? It goes on. End of the 19th century, great American psychologist William James. Goes on to Freud, right? So at the time, I'm about 2/3 of the way through this book, and I brought it up with me. And it's early evening, the sun hadn't gone down yet, I have both garage doors open, I'm sitting in the rocking chair, I'm reading this book, right? Oh, yeah, okay, interesting, this sense of self, okay. A bird flies in. I'm like, okay, all right. I've had this happen before. The bird gets in here, and he's all confused, and he's flying around all over the place. You hear a lot of this. And then you'll hear more of this, and you're going, okay. You get a broom, you try to guide them out. Those two big openings, they'll work, trying to reason with a bird here. But anyway, he's flying around in here, and I'm sitting in the chair, and I'm thinking about getting up. But as it turns out, he's on his way out, okay? He flies over my head, and he goes out, but before he does, he takes a shit on me, right? It's like, bleh. Right on my white t-shirt, like the one I have on now. And this wasn't your standard issue bird poop either. This was purple. It's like splat. I'm like, he must have been eating berries before he did this. And at that moment, I remember thinking, I'm just so glad he didn't shit in my book. Because, see, this book, it was about $35. It wasn't cheap. I'm going to have to double check. It may have been like a university imprint, limited edition, limited print run, small audience, expensive. So I'm like, I'm so happy the bird didn't crap on my book. However, what I didn't realize was this incident was setting me up for the ending of the book. And it was a surprise ending, right? It's the very last page. What this guy has done was he has taken a survey of all the great minds of Western civilization to find out what they had to say about the self, and he distills it in his mind, and he comes to this conclusion: your sense of self is your ability to feel good. When you feel good, you're reconnecting with your sense of self. And I went, wow, I can really relate to that. I like feeling good. Somebody called me a hedonist once. So I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe I am, right? And because I can be crude, I thought about taking a shit. But I was thinking about the before and the after. The congestion of the before and the relief of the after. The after is what we're after. To that moment you feel better, you feel good. You're getting in touch with your sense of self. Babies come into this world, right? They have to have a built-in sense of how to feel good, or they wouldn't have reason to thrive. You know, if the baby's like, oh, I feel rotten all the time, what's the point? No, it's not like that. You have, what is it, the mom hormone, oxytocin. You know, and when mothers are nursing and the baby's like, hey, I feel pretty good right about now. All right, perhaps a better example. Somebody tells you a joke. You'll laugh. For that brief instant, you feel good. You've reconnected with the sense of self. Last week's video in the comments, Jeff Feudner said, why are dentists always so down in the mouth? And if you picture it for a second, you can see the hand going down into the mouth. And I'm like, that was pretty good. You know, and it just takes me back to how good I feel about that bird not shitting on my $30 book. Life is beautiful. So, picking up where we left off in the last video, I was talking about going out into the world with an attitude of cooperating and a system of agreements. What I'm doing when I go out like that is I am connecting with what's going on at the subconscious level, which up until recently I wasn't even particularly aware of. But when it comes to language, there's a structure and there's a lot going on behind it. And now I'm aware of it. I'm also aware that everybody else on a subconscious level is engaged in cooperating and a system of agreement. And like I said, it takes the pressure off because it's organic. Then it's a matter of conversing. And if two people are conversing, they're just riffing off what the other says. You know, like musicians. I like how questions. How questions are very, very interesting. There are why questions, there are what questions, but then there are how questions. What a how question does is it elicits a description of a process, which is another way of saying, tell me a story, all right? I mean, let's say I'm at a bar, and I'm drinking, next to some attractive woman, and I'm like, so, how are you keeping yourself happy today? And then I'd sit back and shut up and just listen to her talk, because then I'll be, getting an opportunity to riff off of what she's saying. Now, consider, instead, me saying, hey, baby, what are you doing to make yourself happy today? And she might say, well, okay, I start off by, calling my friend Sheila, and then we agreed to get together later, and then I went out to get my nails done, and then after that I went shopping for shoes, and after that I got my hair done, and then after that I went to the candy store and bought some chocolate, and then I thought about, well, wait, I got a membership to the gym, and maybe I ought to go to the gym. But if you say, hey, how are you keeping yourself happy today? You've turned her into Scheherazade. She's going to tell you a story. And you already know how to do this. You do this all the time. What you didn't know before was the nutsy boltsy stuff I've been giving you. Okay, a caveat about S.I. Hayakawa and language in thought and action. And I came up with this idea when I was chatting with the dentist, and we're talking about the book and what I was finding in it. And he kind of veered off into a direction that wasn't touched upon by S.I. And I remember thinking, hey, S.I. Hayakawa did not write a book of philosophy. Okay? What I mean by that is he does talk about linking up with other people's nervous systems, but what about the people's nervous systems you don't want to link up with, like predators and sociopaths and con artists and criminals? And I'm one to talk because I ran with a gangster for 4 years. But putting that aside, think about feeling good and reconnecting with your sense of self, but also getting other people to reconnect with their sense of self, because you know something special. That's an ability. It has always been there, but now you can see it. They're doing the cooperating and the system of agreements just like you are unconsciously too. It's an ability. And if you ask me, it's one heck of an ability. Race you back to my apartment.